The gunshot split the night air sharp and decisive against the howling winter storm. Emma Davis stood on her porch, the Winchester Model 70 rifle trembling slightly in her hands, its barrel aimed at the 20 leather-clad figures crowding her front gate. Their motorcycles formed a menacing line, headlights cutting through the swirling snow like predatory eyes in the darkness. "That was a warning," she called out, her voice steadier than her hands. "Next one won't be." The wind carried her words away, but the message was clear. 20 feet separated her from the intruders, 20 feet of Montana snow between safety and whatever storm these men might bring. Larger than the physical distance was the choice that hung in the frigid air between them. Sometimes the line between life and death is just one decision. The lead rider stepped forward, his massive frame silhouetted against the headlights behind him. Snow collected on his broad shoulders as he raised his hands slowly, showing them empty. "We don't mean trouble, miss," he called, his voice deep and weathered like old leather. "Just shelter from the storm. Our convoy got separated. We've got injured men." Emma adjusted her grip on the rifle, her finger still alongside the trigger guard. The old Winchester had belonged to her grandfather, just like this land, just like everything she was about to lose. "There's a town 15 miles south," she replied, though they all knew 15 miles in this blizzard might as well be 1,000. The man took another step forward, and in the porch light, she caught a glimpse of something hanging from his neck. A pendant on a chain glinting silver despite the darkness. A pendant shaped like a winged shadow. Emma's breath caught in her throat. The same symbol she'd found in her grandfather's lockbox just days ago, alongside medals he'd never displayed, and a journal he'd never shared. The man must have seen recognition flicker across her face, because he reached for the pendant, holding it up deliberately. "Your grandfather was James Davis," he said, not a question. "The captain." Time seemed to crystallize in the cold. Emma lowered the rifle just slightly, memories of her grandfather's words echoing in her mind. "A real man never turns away someone who needs help, Emma, no matter who they are." With a deep breath that clouded before her face, Emma Davis made her decision. She lowered the Winchester and stepped aside. "Get your men into the barn," she said. "Quickly." Eagle Ridge Farm had stood on the same plot of Montana soil since shortly after the Civil War. 5 generations of Davis men had worked this land, expanded it, defended it, and passed it down. Now it belonged to Emma, all 350 acres of it, from the weathered farmhouse to the sprawling barn, to the ridge that gave the property its name. In the weak morning light following the storm, Emma stood at her kitchen window, watching the group of bikers who'd spent the night in her barn. They moved about now, checking their motorcycles, stretching cold muscles. Contrary to what she'd expected, they'd been respectful, keeping to the space she'd allotted them, accepting the blankets and hot coffee she'd provided with surprising gratitude. The man with the pendant, he'd introduced himself as Michael Donnelly, though the others called him Iron Mike, was speaking with a younger member of their group, gesturing toward the farmhouse. Emma tensed as she saw them approach, but reminded herself that they'd had ample opportunity to harm her during the night, if that had been their intention. A knock came at the door. Emma wiped her hands on her jeans and opened it to find Iron Mike and the younger man waiting. "Miss Davis," Iron Mike said, removing his leather cap, "we wanted to thank you properly for your hospitality." Up close in daylight, Emma could see he was older than she'd initially thought. Early 60s at least, with a face weathered by years on the road, and what looked like old scars from long-ago battles. His companion was younger, perhaps mid-20s, with an engineer's hands oil-stained and precise. "You know my name," Emma said, not a question. Iron Mike nodded. Your grandfather was a legend among certain circles. When I saw the Eagle Ridge sign, I hoped—" He glanced around. "Is the captain here?" The weight of grief, still fresh after 3 weeks, pressed against Emma's chest. "My grandfather passed away last month. Heart attack." Iron Mike removed his cap completely, holding it against his chest. "I'm sorry to hear that. He was a good man, one of the best." "You knew him?" Emma asked, unable to keep the surprise from her voice. "From Korea," Mike confirmed. "A lifetime ago." Emma hesitated, then stepped back from the door. "You'd better come in." 3 weeks earlier, Emma had stood in this same kitchen watching men in dark suits load her grandfather's simple pine casket into a hearse. There had been no formal military funeral, no honor guard, none of the recognition that should have accompanied a decorated war hero's passing. James Davis had been buried with minimal ceremony in the small plot behind the house alongside his wife and son Emma's father. Now Emma led Iron Mike and the younger man Alex, he'd said his name was, to the kitchen table. They sat awkwardly, these rough men, in her faded country kitchen, with its checkered curtains and the ancient refrigerator humming in the corner. "Coffee?" she offered, more out of ingrained hospitality than genuine welcome. "Please," Iron Mike said. As she poured, he continued, "I should have found him sooner. We all should have." Emma set the mugs down and took a seat across from them. "How did you know my grandfather?" Iron Mike exchanged a glance with Alex before answering. "Your grandfather saved my life, miss. In Korea, 1951, Heartbreak Ridge. We were pinned down, cut off from our unit. The captain carried me 2 miles through enemy territory after I took shrapnel to both legs." Emma blinked. Her grandfather had rarely spoken about his time in the war, had never mentioned heroics or medals or friends made in battle. "He never talked about it," she said. "He wouldn't have—" Mike agreed. "He wasn't that kind of man, but others talked. The Shadow Riders, that's what they called our unit. Special operations behind enemy lines. Your grandfather was our medic, but he was so much more." Emma thought of the locked box she'd found while going through her grandfather's things after the funeral. The box that had contained medals she'd never seen him wear, citations for bravery she'd never heard him mention, and a leather-bound journal she hadn't yet had the courage to read. "Why are you here now?" she asked, her voice steady, despite the emotion building inside her. After all these years, Iron Mike's weathered face showed a flash of shame. "I've been looking for him for a long time. We all have those of us still alive. The Brotherhood of the Road, that's what we call ourselves now. But your grandfather, he disappeared after the war, changed his name back from the one he'd enlisted under, came back here. I only found out he was still alive a few months ago." Emma processed this information slowly. James Davis, the quiet, gentle man who'd raised her after her parents' accident, the man who'd taught her to ride horses and tend wounds and stand up for what was right. He had been running from something, or someone. "I think," she said carefully, "you'd better tell me everything." The small town of Liberty Falls, Montana, had changed dramatically in the 15 years since Emma had moved there to live with her grandfather. Once a tight-knit farming community, it had gradually transformed as developers discovered its picturesque mountain setting and proximity to ski resorts. Old family businesses had closed, replaced by high-end boutiques and coffee shops catering to wealthy tourists and vacation homeowners. From the town's only pharmacy, Emma could see these changes clearly as she collected her grandfather's final prescription heart medication that had arrived too late to help him. Across the street, what had once been Miller's Hardware was now an artisanal cheese shop. The old diner where she'd eaten pancakes with her grandfather every Sunday had become a yoga studio. Emma Davis, a voice called, pulling her from her thoughts. Emma turned to find Bradley Coleman, approaching his expensive suit out of place among the casual winter clothes of the locals. At 38, Bradley had returned to Liberty Falls last year to take over his father's bank, after getting an MBA from Harvard, a fact he mentioned in nearly every conversation. "Bradley," she acknowledged coolly. "I was just coming to find you," he said, flashing the practiced smile that had likely served him well in boardrooms but never quite reached his eyes. "I wanted to discuss your grandfather's loan." Emma tensed. The substantial loan her grandfather had taken out to modernize the farm equipment was the sword hanging over her head. With his sudden death, the balance had come due, and the modest life insurance policy had barely covered the funeral expenses. "I'm aware of the situation," she said. "I just need a little more time." Bradley's smile didn't waver. Of course. It's just that, well, the board is pressing for resolution. 250,000 is a significant sum." "The farm has been in my family for generations," Emma said. "My grandfather never missed a payment before his death." "And no one disputes that James was an exemplary customer," Bradley replied smoothly. "But business is business. We need to see a concrete repayment plan within 60 days, or we'll have to begin foreclosure proceedings." The casual way he referenced foreclosure made Emma's blood run cold. 60 days, she repeated. "And if I can pay it off completely by then," Bradley laughed a short, dismissive sound. "That would certainly solve everything, but let's be realistic. You're a part-time nurse with a mountain of inherited debt. The smart play would be to sell now before foreclosure affects your credit." He leaned closer, lowering his voice conspiratorially. "Between us, I have investors very interested in the Eagle Ridge property. The location is perfect for an exclusive resort development. I could guarantee you enough to clear the debt and have a nice nest egg left over." Emma stepped back, her eyes narrowing. "I'll have your money in 60 days, Mr. Coleman. The farm is not for sale." Bradley's smile finally faltered. "Don't be foolish, Emma. Your grandfather is gone. That land is just dirt and memories now." "To you, maybe," she said, turning to leave. "To me, it's home." As she walked away, Emma could feel his eyes on her back, calculating and cold. She had 60 days to save her grandfather's legacy. Her legacy. And no idea how she would do it. The snow had begun to melt under the weak winter sun as Emma led Iron Mike and Alex to the small study that had been her grandfather's sanctuary. The room was unchanged since his death books lining the walls. The ancient leather chair worn to the shape of his body, the desk where he'd taught Emma to write her name when she was 7. "He spent most of his time in here," Emma explained, moving to the roll-top desk. "After I found him, after the funeral, I started going through his things." She pulled open the bottom drawer and removed a metal lockbox, the kind used for important documents. Setting it on the desk, she entered the combination her birthday and lifted the lid. Inside lay the artifacts of a life her grandfather had never shared with her. A Purple Heart, a Distinguished Service Cross, photographs of young men in uniform, and beneath them all, a leather-bound journal and a silver pendant, identical to the one Iron Mike wore around his neck. "The Shadow Riders," Mike breathed, picking up the pendant reverently. "I haven't seen one of these in decades." Emma watched as he turned the silver emblem over in his rough hands. "What does it mean?" "We weren't an official unit," Mike explained. "More like men selected for special missions. Your grandfather was our medic, but he could fight as well as any of us. The shadow with wings, it was our symbol. Death from above, silent as a shadow." Emma's attention turned to a photograph of 6 young men standing beside a military jeep, mountains rising behind them. Her grandfather stood in the center, younger than she'd ever seen him, his arm around a man she now recognized as a youthful Iron Mike. "He never told me any of this," she said quietly. "The war changed him," Mike replied. "Changed all of us. Some things you carry inside too heavy to share even with those you love." Emma lifted the journal from the box, its leather cover soft with age. "I haven't read it yet. It felt invasive somehow." Mike nodded in understanding. "Some ghosts are better left undisturbed. But if there's something in here that explains why he cut himself off from his past, why he never mentioned any of you." Emma's voice trailed off as she opened the journal to the first page. The handwriting was unmistakably her grandfather's, though more precise than the shaky script of his final years. The first entry was dated June 12, 1951. "Today I killed a man for the first time. Not in the chaos of battle where death is anonymous, but up close. I looked in his eyes as the light went out. Captain says I'll get used to it. God help me if that's true." Emma closed the journal, suddenly uncertain. This was a side of her grandfather she'd never known, never imagined. The gentle man who'd taught her to fish, to respect all living things, had once taken lives himself. "He was different when he came back," Mike said softly, as if reading her thoughts. "We all were. But your grandfather, he carried more than most." Emma's fingers brushed something else in the box, an envelope sealed and addressed simply, "In case of need." She opened it to find $5,000 in cash and a note in her grandfather's handwriting. "Emma, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and you've found what I kept hidden. If trouble comes, look for the men who wear the winged shadow. The Brotherhood will honor its debt to me." She looked up at Iron Mike, understanding dawning. "He knew you might come someday." Mike nodded slowly. "The Brotherhood of the Road spans all 50 states now. We're mostly veterans men who found it hard to fit back into normal society after what we'd seen, what we'd done. We look out for each other, and we never forget a debt. But my grandfather wanted nothing to do with you," Emma pointed out. "He hid this life from everyone." "He had his reasons," Mike said, his eyes drifting to the journal. "The mission at Heartbreak Ridge, not everyone came back. Your grandfather carried that weight." Alex, who had been silent until now, stepped forward. "Miss Davis, there's something else you should know. The Brotherhood doesn't just ride for pleasure. We protect our own. And as the captain's granddaughter, that includes you now." Emma almost laughed. "Protect me from what?" The answer came from an unexpected source, the sound of tires on gravel outside. Emma moved to the window to see a police cruiser pulling up Sheriff William Harris at the wheel. "The sheriff," she said, turning back to her guests. "He probably heard about the motorcycles." Iron Mike and Alex exchanged a look that made Emma suddenly uneasy. "What aren't you telling me?" she demanded. "The Brotherhood has been investigating something," Mike said carefully. "Corruption in small towns across 3 states. Land grabs, foreclosures, forced sales. A pattern. And Liberty Falls is part of this pattern." Emma asked, the pieces starting to align in her mind. "We think so," Alex confirmed. "Your grandfather might have known something. That bank loan—" A knock at the door interrupted him. Firm, authoritative. "Miss Davis," Sheriff Harris called. "Need to have a word with you about your visitors." Emma glanced at Iron Mike, who gave a nearly imperceptible nod. "Whatever happens," he murmured, "remember, you're not alone anymore." With that cryptic reassurance, Emma went to answer the door. Sheriff William Harris had served Liberty Falls for 20 years. His weathered face and salt-and-pepper hair as much a fixture of the town as the mountains themselves. But something had changed in recent months. His easy smile had hardened into something more calculating, his casual friendliness replaced by a watchful distance. "Morning, Emma," he said as she opened the door, his hand resting casually near his holster. "Heard you had some unexpected guests last night." "News travels fast," Emma replied, not inviting him in. "Small town." Harris shrugged, peering past her into the house. "Mind if I come in? Just want to make sure everything's all right." Reluctantly, Emma stepped aside. The sheriff entered, removing his hat, his eyes immediately finding Iron Mike and Alex in the doorway to the study. "Gentlemen," he acknowledged with a nod that contained no warmth. "Passing through, storm caught us by surprise," Iron Mike replied evenly. "Miss Davis was kind enough to offer shelter." Sheriff Harris studied him, recognition flickering in his eyes. "You boys, with that motorcycle club, the one that's been causing trouble over in Ridgefield in Carson County." "We're just travelers," Mike said, his tone neutral but firm. "Travelers?" Harris repeated skeptically. "Well, the storm's past now. I'm sure you'll be moving on." "Actually," Emma interjected, surprising herself, "they're staying to help with some repairs around the farm. Storm damaged the barn roof." The sheriff's eyes narrowed slightly. "That so wouldn't have pegged these gentlemen as the handyman type." "We contain multitudes, Sheriff," Iron Mike said with the ghost of a smile. An uncomfortable silence stretched between them until Harris finally replaced his hat. "Well, just so you know, Emma Bradley Coleman mentioned he'd be stopping by today to discuss your grandfather's loan. Might want to clean the place up a bit before he arrives." His gaze swept meaningfully over the two bikers. "I appreciate your concern," Emma said coolly, "but I can manage my own affairs." Harris nodded unconvinced. "Your grandfather was a good man, respected in this town. Be ashamed to see his legacy tarnished." The threat, however veiled, hung in the air as he turned to leave. At the door, he paused. "Oh, and if your friend's associates show up, they should know we have ordinances against large gatherings without permits, motorcycle rallies included." After the sheriff's cruiser disappeared down the long driveway, Emma turned to Iron Mike, her earlier suspicion returning. "What exactly have you gotten me involved in?" she demanded. "It's more what you were already involved in without knowing," Mike replied grimly. "Your grandfather's death, was it really a heart attack?" Emma stared at him, the implication stealing her breath. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying the captain was looking into something before he died," Mike explained. "Something about the bank, about land deals in Liberty Falls. He contacted an old friend from the unit 3 months ago, said he'd found evidence of fraud." "Why wouldn't he go to the police?" Emma asked, though the answer was becoming clear as she remembered the sheriff's barely veiled threat. "Because he wasn't sure who he could trust," Alex said, stepping forward. "Miss Davis, the bank that holds your grandfather's loan, has foreclosed on 12 family farms in 3 counties over the past 18 months. All the properties were subsequently developed by the same company, Ridgeline Ventures." "And let me guess," Emma said bitterly, "Bradley Coleman is involved with Ridgeline." Alex nodded. "He's the principal investor. The pattern is always the same: sudden call on loans. Impossible. Repayment terms, quick foreclosure, land flip to developers." Emma sank into a chair, her mind racing. "My grandfather's loan wasn't due for another 5 years. The terms changed when he died." "Convenient timing," Iron Mike observed darkly. Emma looked up at him, a chill settling in her stomach. "Are you suggesting my grandfather was murdered?" Before Mike could answer, the sound of motorcycles starting up came from the direction of the barn. Alex moved to the window. "The rest of the Brotherhood is getting ready to leave," he said. "Keeping a low profile like we discussed." "But not you two," Emma asked. We thought it best to split up, Mike explained, less conspicuous. The others will set up at a campground 20 miles east within easy reach if needed. And what exactly are you planning to do here? Emma demanded. Iron Mike's weathered face softened slightly. Help you if you'll let us. The captain saved my life once. I never got the chance to repay that debt. Now, maybe I can by helping his granddaughter. Emma stood and moved to the window, watching as the line of motorcycles began making its way down the long driveway. 20 men who'd arrived as strangers in the night, now somehow connected to her future. I have 60 days until the bank forecloses, she said finally. If my grandfather was investigating something, if his death wasn't natural, she turned back to face them. I need to know everything. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across Eagle Ridge Farm as Emma worked alongside Alex to patch the barn roof. Despite her initial skepticism, he had proven surprisingly skilled with tools, climbing the old ladder with casual confidence and directing their efforts with an engineer's precision. From her perch on the roof, Emma could see Iron Mike below, methodically splitting firewood with her grandfather's old axe. His powerful strokes belied his age, each log separating cleanly under the blade. He was Special Forces, before he was a shadow rider, Alex commented, following her gaze. Still the strongest man I've ever met. Emma handed him another shingle. How did you get involved with the Brotherhood? You seem younger than most of them. Alex smiled, hammering the shingle into place. My father was a member. Served in the Gulf War, came back different. The Brotherhood helped him find purpose again. His smile faded. When he died 3 years ago, they became my family. I'm sorry about your father, Emma said softly. Alex nodded his thanks, then pointed toward the farmhouse. Your grandfather built this place to last. Solid foundations, good bones. You don't see craftsmanship like that anymore. 5 generations of Davis blood and sweat in this soil, Emma agreed, looking out over the rolling fields that stretched toward the distant mountains. I can't lose it, Alex. Not to some corporate developer who sees it as nothing but dollar signs. You won't, he promised with a conviction that surprised her. The Brotherhood protects its own. Their work was interrupted by the sound of an expensive engine purring up the driveway. A sleek black Audi R8 appeared, looking entirely out of place among the weathered farm buildings. Bradley Coleman, Emma muttered, recognizing the car. Right on schedule. She climbed down the ladder, quickly brushing sawdust from her jeans as Bradley emerged from his vehicle. He wore a camel hair coat over his suit, Italian leather shoes entirely unsuited to the muddy farmyard. Emma, he called, his practiced smile faltering slightly as he noticed Iron Mike by the woodpile. I see you still have guests. Mr. Coleman, Emma acknowledged, not bothering with warmth. What can I do for you? Bradley's eyes flicked from Iron Mike to Alex, who had descended the ladder to stand beside Emma. I was hoping we could speak privately. Bank business. Anything you have to say, you can say in front of my friends, Emma replied firmly. Bradley's smile tightened. Very well. I've been reviewing your grandfather's loan documents, and I'm afraid there's been a complication. What kind of complication? Emma asked, though she already suspected. It seems there was a clause regarding change of ownership, Bradley explained, his tone falsely apologetic. In the event of your grandfather's death, the terms revert to an accelerated repayment schedule. Convenient clause, Iron Mike observed from where he stood, axe still in hand. Bradley ignored him. I've brought the paperwork showing the updated terms. $250,000 due in full within 60 days of your grandfather's passing. He removed an envelope from his coat. However, I'm also prepared to offer an alternative. Your resort development, Emma stated flatly. Bradley's eyebrows raised slightly in surprise. You've heard about Ridgeline Estates, then? Yes, my investment group is prepared to offer you $300,000 for the property. More than enough to clear the debt and give you a fresh start somewhere new. And if I refuse, then the bank will have no choice but to begin foreclosure proceedings when the 60 days expire. Bradley's sympathetic expression couldn't mask the calculation in his eyes. Emma, be reasonable. This land is a burden. The farm barely breaks even in good years. It's not about the money, Emma said. This land is my heritage. Heritage doesn't pay bills, Bradley countered. Your grandfather understood that why else would he have taken out such a substantial loan? Emma frowned. The loan had always puzzled her. Her grandfather had been frugal to a fault, the farm equipment functional if outdated. What had he needed $250,000 for? I'd like to see the original loan documents, she said suddenly. Bradley's smile slipped just slightly. They're at the bank, of course, but I assure you everything is in order. I'm sure it is, Emma replied. But I'd still like to see them. Tomorrow morning. I'm afraid I'll be in meetings all day, Bradley hedged. Perhaps next week. Tomorrow, Emma insisted, or I'll have my lawyer request them formally. The threat was empty. She had no lawyer, but Bradley didn't know that. Fine. He conceded his charm, now paper-thin. 10 o'clock, though it won't change anything. As Bradley turned to leave, his gaze settled on Iron Mike, who had moved closer during the conversation, the axe still casually held in his massive hands. You should be careful about the company you keep, Emma, Bradley advised, his voice lowering. This town has a long memory. Your grandfather was respected here. It would be a shame to see that respect diminished. The echo of Sheriff Harris's earlier warning sent a chill through Emma. Good day, Mr. Coleman, she said firmly. They watched in silence as the Audi disappeared down the driveway, the throaty rumble of its V10 engine fading into the distance. Once it was gone, Emma turned to Iron Mike. My grandfather never mentioned a loan that size to me, she said, and he told me everything. Almost everything, Mike corrected gently, nodding toward the house where the journal and medals lay hidden. The captain had his secrets. But $250,000, Emma shook her head. That's not a secret, that's a fortune. What could he have needed it for? Alex had been unusually quiet during Bradley's visit, but now he spoke up. Miss Davis, may I see your grandfather's workshop, the one where he kept his tools and farm records? Emma looked at him curiously. Of course, but why? Just a hunch, Alex replied. If the captain was investigating corruption at the bank, he would have kept evidence somewhere. The workshop was a separate building behind the barn, a simple structure that had once been a smokehouse before her grandfather converted it. Inside, tools hung in meticulous order on pegboards, each one outlined so its proper place was clear. A workbench ran along one wall, its surface clean, except for a half-completed birdhouse, her grandfather's final project. He was organized, Alex observed, running a hand along the workbench. Military precision, Emma confirmed. He could find any tool blindfolded. Alex moved methodically through the space-opening drawers, examining shelves. Iron Mike stood at the doorway, watching silently. What exactly are we looking for? Emma asked after several minutes of fruitless searching. Not sure, Alex admitted. But the captain was old school. If he had evidence, he wouldn't have kept it on a computer. And Emma thought for a moment, then moved to a file cabinet in the corner. He kept all his farm records here. Expenses, equipment, maintenance, crop, yields. She pulled open the top drawer, revealing neatly labeled folders. 30 years of data, all handwritten. Alex joined her, scanning the labels. Financial records. Bottom drawer, Emma directed. Tax returns, bank statements, everything. As Alex knelt to open the bottom drawer, Emma's attention was drawn to the workbench again, to the half-built birdhouse her grandfather would never complete. Something about it seemed wrong. The birdhouse was a simple design, the kind her grandfather had built dozens of times before. But this one was different, slightly larger, the entrance hole positioned oddly. "Wait," she said, moving to the workbench. "This isn't a birdhouse." She picked up the wooden structure, turning it over in her hands. The bottom panel slid aside at her touch, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside lay a small digital voice recorder. Emma stared at it, her heart pounding. He never used digital anything if he could avoid it. Iron Mike moved from the doorway, his interest piqued. The captain adapting to modern technology must have been important. With trembling fingers, Emma pressed the play button. Her grandfather's voice filled the small workshop, as clear and steady as if he were standing beside them. "This is James Davis, October 12, 2023. Meeting with Richard Coleman regarding discrepancies in loan documentation. Recording made with his knowledge and consent. Richard Coleman, Bradley's father, the previous bank president who had died just 2 months before her grandfather." A second voice joined the recording, older but with the same polished tone as Bradley. "James, these accusations are serious. If what you're suggesting is true, it's all here, Richard," her grandfather's voice replied. "Forged signatures, altered terms, inflated appraisals. 12 families lost their farms because of doctored paperwork. Your son's company swooped in each time to buy the land at a fraction of its worth." "Bradley wouldn't," Richard's voice faltered. "These are his signatures, but he must have been misled." "Look at the dates, Richard. Look at the pattern. This isn't coincidence. And now my loan documents have been altered too." A heavy sigh came through the recorder. "What do you need from me, James?" "Access to the original files. Evidence that my loan was for $50,000, not $250. Proof that someone changed the terms after I signed. If what you're saying is true, this goes beyond Bradley. Sheriff Harris signed off on these foreclosures. Judge Whitman approved them without question." "I know," her grandfather replied grimly. "Half the town leadership could be involved. That's why I need hard evidence before I take this to the state authorities." "I'll help you, James. For the sake of our friendship, for the sake of this town. Meet me at the bank tomorrow night after closing. I'll have the original files ready." The recording ended abruptly. Emma looked up at Iron Mike and Alex, her face pale. "My grandfather died the next day," she whispered. "And Richard Coleman died a week later. Heart attacks, both of them." Iron Mike's weathered face hardened. "The captain was murdered," he said, giving voice to what they were all thinking. "And so was Richard Coleman." "But how do we prove it?" Emma asked. "This recording shows motive, but not who did it or how." Alex had been examining the voice recorder more closely. "There are more recordings on here," he said. 15 files in total. Emma took a deep breath, steadying herself against the workbench. "We need to listen to all of them. If my grandfather was killed because of what he discovered, then you could be in danger too," Iron Mike finished for her. "The Brotherhood stays. All of us." As if in answer to his words, the distinctive rumble of V-twin engines echoed across Eagle Ridge Farm. But these weren't the familiar Harleys of the Brotherhood returning. Emma moved to the workshop door. 3 police cruisers were coming up the driveway, lights flashing. "Sheriff Harris," she said, her voice tight, "and he's brought reinforcements." Iron Mike stepped beside her, his hand coming to rest reassuringly on her shoulder. "Remember what your grandfather taught you, Emma. Stand your ground. The truth is on your side." "And so are we," Alex added, pocketing the recorder. "The Brotherhood protects its own." As the cruisers drew closer, Emma thought of her grandfather, the quiet farmer she'd known, and the war hero she was just discovering. She thought of the land beneath her feet, 5 generations of Davis blood and sweat. She thought of the truth hidden in that small recorder, truth people had already died for. With Iron Mike and Alex flanking her, Emma stepped out to meet whatever storm was coming. The line had been drawn. Eagle Ridge Farm would not fall without a fight. Sometimes the difference between surrender and survival is just one decision. And Emma Davis had made hers. The 3 police cruisers came to a stop in a practiced formation that blocked the workshop entrance. Dust swirled around their wheels, golden in the late afternoon light. Sheriff Harris stepped out first, followed by 4 deputies, their hands resting near their holsters in silent warning. Emma stood her ground on the workshop steps, the voice recorder safely hidden in Alex's pocket. Iron Mike stood slightly behind her right shoulder, a solid presence radiating quiet strength. His weathered face revealed nothing, but his eyes missed nothing. "Miss Davis," Sheriff Harris called, approaching with deliberate steps. "We need to have a conversation about your guests." "Sheriff," Emma acknowledged, her voice steadier than her heartbeat. "What brings the entire department out to Eagle Ridge?" Harris stopped a few yards away, thumbs hooked in his belt. "Got a call from Bradley Coleman. Says he felt threatened during his visit earlier." His gaze shifted to Iron Mike. "Says your friend here was brandishing an axe." "I was chopping firewood," Iron Mike replied evenly, "on private property at the owner's request." "A misunderstanding, then," Harris said, though his tone suggested otherwise. "Still, we've had reports of a motorcycle gang operating in the area. Intimidation, possible drug trafficking." Emma crossed her arms. "The only intimidation I've experienced lately came from Mr. Coleman and his impossible loan terms." Harris's eyes narrowed. "Be careful making accusations, Emma. Bradley Coleman is a respected businessman in this community." "And what about Richard Coleman?" Emma asked, watching carefully for his reaction. "Was he respected too?" A flicker of something surprised concern crossed the sheriff's face before he masked it. "Richard was a fine man. Heart attack took him too soon, just like your grandfather." "Convenient timing," Emma observed. 2 healthy men, both dead of heart attacks, within weeks of each other. The sheriff's posture stiffened. "What exactly are you implying?" Before Emma could respond, the sound of motorcycles filled the air again. This time the rumble was familiar, the Brotherhood returning. Around the bend in the driveway came the 20 riders who had left that morning, now joined by at least 30 more. Harris's hand moved to his gun. "I thought I made myself clear about gatherings without permits." The motorcycles formed a semicircle behind the police cruisers, their engines idling with the distinctive potato-potato-potato pulse of Harley-Davidson V-twins. At their center was a massive rider on a vintage 1976 Harley FLH Electra Glide, its chrome gleaming in the afternoon sun. His silver beard flowed over a leather vest adorned with military patches. Doc Williams, the former combat medic Emma had met briefly the night before. "Miss Davis invited us for dinner," Doc called out, his deep voice carrying easily across the yard. 50 friends hardly constitutes a rally, Sheriff." Harris looked from the bikers to Emma, calculation evident in his eyes. He was outnumbered now, and he knew it. "We'll continue this conversation another time," he said finally. "But I suggest your dinner guests don't overstay their welcome. Liberty Falls has ordinances about loitering and noise." With that, he gestured to his deputies and they returned to their cruisers. The vehicles performed a careful three-point turn, then departed down the driveway, dust billowing in their wake. As the sound of police engines faded, Doc dismounted and approached Emma. "Looked like you could use some reinforcements," he said, his weathered face creasing in a smile that didn't reach his vigilant eyes. "Perfect timing," Iron Mike agreed, clasping the man's shoulder. "But I thought you were keeping a low profile at the campground." Doc glanced at the assembled riders. "Plans changed when we got word that the sheriff was mobilizing. The Brotherhood protects its own." Emma looked at the gathering of leather-clad men and a few women she now noticed who had come to her aid without hesitation. Strangers 24 hours ago, now standing between her and those who would take her home. "Thank you," she said simply, the words inadequate for the emotion behind them. Doc nodded in acknowledgement. "The captain would have done the same for any of us." He turned to Iron Mike. "What did the sheriff want?" "Intimidation," Mike replied. Coleman felt threatened during his visit. "And there's more," Alex added, producing the voice recorder from his pocket. "We found evidence that Emma's grandfather and Bradley's father were investigating bank fraud before they died." Doc's expression darkened. "Both men died of heart attacks, if I recall." "Too convenient to be coincidence," Emma said. "We need to hear the rest of those recordings," Iron Mike decided. "And we need to secure the farm. If they're willing to murder to protect their scheme, they won't stop now." Emma looked out at the Brotherhood members still mounted on their bikes, engines idling. "I don't have accommodations for 50 people." Doc's laugh was a surprising rumble. "We're bikers, Miss Davis. We've slept under worse than Montana stars." As the sun began its descent behind the mountains, casting long shadows across Eagle Ridge Farm, Emma made a decision. These men and women, bound by a code of honor her grandfather had once shared, were now her best hope of uncovering the truth and surviving long enough to expose it. "The barn has plenty of space," she said, "and I've got a feeling we're going to need all the help we can get." Night fell across Eagle Ridge Farm, bringing with it a crystalline cold that turned breath to vapor and frosted the windows of the old farmhouse. Inside, gathered around the kitchen table, Emma sat with Iron Mike, Alex, and Doc, listening to the recordings her grandfather had left behind. James Davis's voice filled the room, methodical and precise, as he documented meetings with landowners who had lost their farms to suspicious foreclosures. He had interviewed 12 families across 3 counties, each story following the same pattern. Unexpected loan term changes impossibly short, repayment windows, foreclosure proceedings that moved with suspicious speed, and finally acquisition by Ridgeline Ventures at prices far below market value. "Your grandfather was building a RICO case," Doc observed as one recording ended. "Organized corruption across multiple jurisdictions. And that would explain why he couldn't go to local authorities," Alex added. "If the sheriff and judge were involved, he'd need state-level intervention, maybe federal," Iron Mike finished. "But he needed ironclad evidence first." Emma rubbed her temples, fighting exhaustion. The revelations of the day had left her emotionally drained, yet sleep seemed impossible with her grandfather's voice describing the conspiracy that had likely cost him his life. The final recording began to play, dated just 2 days before her grandfather's death. "This is James Davis. I've confirmed that my own loan documents were altered after signing. Original amount $50,000 for equipment repairs. Current bank records show $250,000 with my signature on paperwork I never saw. Richard Coleman has agreed to provide the original documents tomorrow night. If they've been destroyed, the signature verification should prove forgery." This will be the evidence we need to bring the entire operation down. A pause, then her grandfather's voice continued softer now. Emma, if you're hearing this, I'm sorry for keeping you in the dark. I thought I was protecting you. Richard believes his son is involved, but doesn't know how deep it goes. We'll handle this properly through legal channels. But if something happens to me, find Mike Donnelly, the Brotherhood of the Road. Show them the shadow with wings, and they'll help you finish what I started. The recording ended, leaving only the sound of the wind rattling the old farmhouse windows. Emma stared at the small device, tears threatening at the corners of her eyes. He knew, she whispered. He knew he was in danger. Iron Mike reached across the table, his calloused hand covering hers briefly. The captain was always 3 steps ahead, even at the end. But it wasn't enough to save him, Emma said, anger cutting through her grief. Or Richard Coleman. 2 heart attacks within weeks. Doc mused, his medical training evident in his thoughtful frown. Natural causes on paper, but there are ways to induce cardiac arrest that leave little evidence. Especially if the medical examiner doesn't look too closely, Alex added. So what now? Emma asked. We have recordings suggesting fraud, but nothing concrete proving murder or showing the altered documents. Iron Mike leaned back in his chair, which creaked under his substantial frame. Tomorrow, you go to the bank as planned. Request those original loan documents. See what story they tell you. And if the originals have been destroyed, Emma asked. Then we move to Plan B, Doc replied. The captain mentioned signature verification. We need a handwriting expert to examine the documents they do have. And in the meantime, Alex said, we protect Eagle Ridge Farm. The Brotherhood will establish a perimeter rotating watches through the night. Emma looked at these 3 men, a Special Forces veteran, a combat medic, and a young engineer who had stepped into her life like characters from one of her grandfather's bedtime stories. Protectors appearing when most needed, carrying a code of honor from a different era. Why are you all doing this? She asked quietly. You barely know me. We knew the captain, Iron Mike answered simply. That's enough. Doc nodded in agreement. The Brotherhood has a saying, the debt of one is the debt of all. Your grandfather saved many lives, including Mike's. That debt passes to his blood. And some things are just worth fighting for. Alex added, his gaze moving to the window where the outline of the barn was visible in the moonlight. A home. Justice, truth. Emma felt something stir inside her, a resolve that pushed back against the fear and uncertainty. Her grandfather had faced down enemies in war and enemies at home. He had taught her to stand her ground, to protect what mattered, to recognize right from wrong. Tomorrow, she said, we start fighting back. Dawn broke over Eagle Ridge Farm with a clarity that turned the frost-covered fields to diamonds. Emma stood on the porch, steam rising from her coffee mug, watching as Brotherhood members moved about the property with purpose. Some patrolled the perimeter on foot, others tended to their motorcycles or assisted with farm chores. The barn had been transformed into a makeshift headquarters, with bedrolls arranged neatly along the walls and a communication center established in the tack room. The sound of footsteps behind her announced Alex's arrival. Morning. He greeted, his own mug in hand. Sleep well. Hardly at all, Emma admitted. Too much to process. Alex nodded in understanding. Big day ahead. Mike and Doc are preparing the others for potential scenarios while you're at the bank. Emma turned to face him. You think Bradley Coleman will try something? I think a cornered animal is most dangerous, Alex replied carefully. If he suspects we found your grandfather's recordings, he might accelerate his plans. The weight of that possibility settled heavily on Emma's shoulders. I still don't understand why my grandfather took out that loan in the first place. $50,000 is still a significant amount. Alex sipped his coffee, considering. The captain was deliberate in everything he did. There must have been a reason. A commotion at the far end of the driveway interrupted their conversation. A single motorcycle was approaching, not the familiar rumble of a Harley, but the higher-pitched whine of a sport bike. Emma watched as the rider navigated the gravel drive with expert precision, coming to a stop near the porch. The figure dismounted, removing a sleek helmet, to reveal a woman in her 40s, with silver-streaked dark hair pulled into a practical braid. Julia Turner. She introduced herself, extending a gloved hand to Emma. Brotherhood Legal Counsel. Mike called me yesterday. Emma shook the offered hand, surprised. The Brotherhood has lawyers. Julia's smile was wry. We have members in every profession, Miss Davis. Some of us just wear suits instead of leather when the situation calls for it. Iron Mike emerged from the barn, crossing the yard with long strides. Jules, he greeted the newcomer warmly, glad you could make it. Wouldn't miss it, Julia replied, her expression growing serious. I reviewed the situation based on your call. If what you've told me is accurate, we're looking at bank fraud, falsification of legal documents, possible RICO violations, and potentially 2 homicides disguised as natural deaths. Emma felt a chill that had nothing to do with the morning air. Hearing it laid out so clinically made the conspiracy against her grandfather seem both more real and more overwhelming. Can we prove any of it? She asked. That's what we're going to find out, Julia replied, reaching into her saddlebag and removing a leather portfolio. I've prepared a formal request for all documentation related to your grandfather's loan. Under federal banking regulations, they're required to provide complete records within 1 business day. Bradley Coleman has already agreed to meet with me at 10, Emma said. Julia checked her watch. Perfect. That gives us 2 hours to prepare. I'll accompany you as your legal representative. Coleman will recognize you're not just any lawyer, Iron Mike pointed out. Julia's smile was sharp. That's the idea. The Brotherhood's reputation can work in our favor sometimes. Let them know we're watching. Emma led the way into the farmhouse where Julia spread documents across the kitchen table. For the next hour, the lawyer briefed Emma on banking regulations, her legal rights, and the specific questions to ask. Alex and Iron Mike listened intently, occasionally offering suggestions based on the recordings they'd heard. As Emma changed into her most professional outfit, a simple navy blazer over jeans, the closest thing to business attire she owned, she caught sight of her grandfather's photograph on the dresser. James Davis, in his 60s, silver-haired and weather-worn, standing proudly beside the barn he'd rebuilt with his own hands. I'm going to make this right, Grandpa, she whispered. Whatever it takes. When she returned to the kitchen, she found Julia on the phone, her expression grim as she ended the call. Change of plans, the lawyer announced. That was my contact at the State Banking Commission. Overnight, Liberty Falls Bank filed emergency paperwork to accelerate the foreclosure on Eagle Ridge Farm. They can't do that, Emma protested. I have 60 days. They're claiming special circumstances, risk of property damage or devaluation due to criminal activity on the premises. The Brotherhood, Alex realized. Julia nodded. They're using the bikers' presence as justification to seize the property immediately. Sheriff Harris has already obtained the necessary order from Judge Whitman. How long do we have? Iron Mike asked, his voice deceptively calm. The paperwork was filed at 8 a.m. They could be here with an eviction notice by noon. Emma felt the floor shift beneath her feet. 4 hours. After 5 generations, her family's legacy could be erased in 4 hours. Then we move now, she said, finding strength in decisive action. We go to the bank, immediately confront Bradley Coleman with what we know. With what evidence? Julia cautioned. Recordings suggesting fraud aren't enough to stop a foreclosure already approved by a judge. What about Richard Coleman's promise to provide the original documents? Alex asked. Maybe they still exist somewhere in the bank. Iron Mike had been unusually quiet, his weathered face contemplative. Now he spoke, his deep voice cutting through the mounting tension. There's something we're missing, he said. James Davis was methodical, strategic. He wouldn't have left his granddaughter vulnerable without a contingency plan. Emma's thoughts raced, trying to see the situation as her grandfather would have. What was she overlooking? The answer came in a sudden flash of clarity. The loan itself, she said slowly. $50,000 for equipment repairs. But Grandpa never bought new equipment. The tractor, the plow, the harvester, they're all the same ones he's had for years. She turned to Iron Mike, excitement building. What if the loan wasn't for equipment at all? What if that was just the cover story? Understanding dawned in Mike's eyes. The captain was using the bank's own system against them. Emma nodded, the pieces falling into place. He took out a legitimate loan as bait, knowing they'd alter the documents. He needed proof of their methods, their signatures on the falsified paperwork. A deliberate trap, Julia mused, professional appreciation in her tone. Brilliant, but risky. And it cost him his life, Emma said softly. But where did the money go? $50,000 doesn't just disappear. The question hung in the air unanswered. Then Alex snapped his fingers. The farm records, he said. Yesterday in the workshop, there were decades of financial records in that filing cabinet. If your grandfather withdrew $50,000, it would show up in his accounts. Within minutes, they were in the workshop, Emma methodically going through the most recent financial folders. She found what they were looking for in a file labeled Special Projects. Here, she said, pulling out a bank statement. October 5th last year. Withdrawal of $48,000 in cash. Nearly the full loan amount, Julia observed. But that still doesn't tell us what he did with it. Emma continued scanning the documents, turning pages with increasing urgency, until she stopped suddenly, her finger resting on a single line entry in her grandfather's meticulous handwriting. Land acquisition, she read aloud. Northern parcel, White Rock Canyon. Iron Mike leaned over her shoulder. White Rock Canyon. That's on the other side of the ridge, isn't it? Emma nodded slowly. It's undeveloped land, mostly rock and scrub pine, not good for farming. But potentially valuable for other purposes, Julia suggested. Development mining rights, water access, or something else entirely, Emma murmured, remembering her grandfather's small, mysterious smiles when he spoke of the future of Eagle Ridge. He'd always said the farm had more value than anyone knew. She flipped through more pages, finding a deed of purchase and survey map. He bought 200 acres adjoining our property line through a shell company he created, Eagle Heritage Holdings. Smart, Julia commented, keeping it separate from his personal assets under a corporate veil. Alex studied the survey map. This terrain is rough, not suitable for the kind of resort Coleman wants to build. Why would your grandfather spend his loan money on it? Emma traced the boundary lines with her finger, following the contours of the ridge that gave the farm its name. Whatever the reason, he thought it was worth protecting, worth creating an elaborate trap to expose Coleman's operation. Iron Mike straightened, decision made. We need to see this land today. But the bank meeting, Emma began. Can wait, Julia interrupted. If there's something on that property that explains why your grandfather was killed, it could be our best leverage against Coleman. We'll split up, Iron Mike decided. Julia and Emma head to the bank as planned. Delay, ask questions, request documentation. Keep Coleman occupied. Alex and I will take Doc and a few others to investigate White Rock Canyon. Emma hesitated, torn between confronting her grandfather's suspected killer and discovering the secret he'd died protecting. Trust the Brotherhood, Iron Mike said gently. Your grandfather did. With a deep breath, Emma nodded. Be careful. If this land is important enough to kill for, we'll be ready, Alex assured her. The captain taught us well. As they exited the workshop, the morning sun now fully above the mountains, Emma noticed unusual activity at the barn. Brotherhood members were gathering checking weapons that hadn't been visible the day before, hunting rifles mostly, but also sidearms worn in concealed holsters. Standard precaution, Iron Mike explained, following her gaze. We're not looking for a fight, but we're not walking into an ambush either. Emma thought of her grandfather, the gentle farmer who had once been a warrior who had carried the burdens of both identities. For the first time, she truly understood the weight he had borne all those years. Let's go, she said, squaring her shoulders. It's time to finish what he started. Liberty Falls Bank occupied a stately brick building on Main Street, its classical architecture a deliberate statement of permanence and tradition. Emma parked her truck across the street, observing the morning activity through the plate glass windows. Inside, tellers served the few customers present with practiced efficiency. Remember, Julia advised, as they prepared to enter, we're not accusing anyone yet. We're simply requesting documentation, as is your right. Emma nodded, smoothing her blazer nervously. And if Coleman refuses, then we have cause to involve state banking regulators, Julia replied. But let's hope it doesn't come to that. We need time for Mike and Alex to investigate the canyon property. They crossed the street and climbed the stone steps to the bank's entrance. Inside, the air was cool and still scented with lemon polish and old money. The marble floor echoed beneath their boots as they approached the receptionist. Emma Davis, to see Bradley Coleman. Emma announced more confidently than she felt. He's expecting me. The receptionist, a young woman with carefully styled hair, glanced at Julia with barely concealed curiosity. And your associate, Julia Turner, legal counsel, Julia replied smoothly, presenting a business card. The receptionist's eyebrows rose slightly, but she maintained her professional demeanor. One moment, please. As they waited, Emma studied the bank's interior. Framed photographs lined the walls, showing the institution's history from its founding in 1892 through various expansions. In one from the 1980s, she recognized Richard Coleman cutting a ribbon at a branch opening. Her own grandfather standing among the crowd of onlookers. Miss Davis. Bradley Coleman's voice pulled her attention back to the present. He stood in the doorway to his office, his smile as practiced as ever, though it faltered slightly when he noticed Julia. I wasn't aware you'd be bringing representation, he said, extending his hand to Emma, but not to Julia. Recent developments suggested legal guidance would be prudent, Emma replied, deliberately vague. I believe you received notice of the accelerated foreclosure proceeding. A flicker of surprise crossed Bradley's face before he masked it. Yes, unfortunate business. Sheriff Harris expressed concerns about the individuals currently occupying your property. For your safety, of course. Of course, Emma echoed, not bothering to hide her skepticism. Shall we discuss the loan documents now? Bradley gestured toward his office. Please come in. The office was a study in calculated opulence, leather furniture, mahogany bookshelves, golf trophies displayed prominently. A large portrait of Richard Coleman hung behind the desk, the elder banker's eyes seemingly following their movement across the room. Now then, Bradley began, settling into his chair. I've prepared copies of the loan agreement your grandfather signed. He slid a folder across the desk. As you can see, the amount is clearly stated, $250,000, with his signature acknowledging the terms. Emma opened the folder, examining the document inside. The signature did indeed resemble her grandfather's, though something about it struck her as off, perhaps slightly too precise, lacking the subtle variations of genuine handwriting. "This is the original?" she asked. "A certified copy," Bradley replied smoothly. "Banking regulations require the originals to remain in our secure files." Julia leaned forward. "Under the Bank Secrecy Act and Consumer Financial Protection Bureau regulations, Miss Davis has the right to examine all original documentation related to this loan." Bradley's smile tightened. "Of course. However, retrieval from our secure storage requires advance notice. Perhaps next week." "Today," Julia interrupted firmly, "particularly in light of the accelerated foreclosure proceedings." "I'm afraid that won't be possible," Bradley insisted, his tone hardening. "Our records custodian is out today, and only he has access to the secure storage facility." Emma maintained a neutral expression, though her heart raced. Bradley was lying. She could see it in the too deliberate casualness of his posture, the slight tension around his eyes. "That's disappointing," she said. "My grandfather mentioned speaking with your father about reviewing his original loan documents, just before both of them died so suddenly." The calculated reference landed like a stone dropped in still water. Bradley's face remained composed, but his hands tensed on the desk. "Heart disease affects many men their age," he said carefully. "A tragic coincidence." "Coincidences seem to happen frequently around Liberty Falls Bank," Julia observed. "Like how 12 family farms foreclosed in the past 18 months were all purchased by Ridgeline Ventures at prices well below market value." Bradley's jaw tightened. "I'm not sure what you're implying, but Ridgeline's business practices are not relevant to Miss Davis's loan situation." "Aren't they?" Emma asked. "Considering you're the principal investor in Ridgeline, and Eagle Ridge Farm is the next property on your acquisition list." For a moment, Bradley's mask of professional courtesy slipped, revealing something cold and calculating beneath. Then it was gone, replaced by practiced concern. "Emma," he said, leaning forward, "I understand you're upset. Losing your grandfather, facing foreclosure, it's a lot to handle at your age. But constructing conspiracy theories won't help your situation." "Then show us the original loan documents," Julia challenged. "Prove the amount was legitimately $250,000 with James Davis's authentic signature." Bradley's smile was thin. "As I said, that's not possible today. Now, if there's nothing else—" Emma glanced at her watch. They'd been in the bank 20 minutes, not nearly long enough to give Iron Mike and Alex the time they needed at White Rock Canyon. "Actually," she said, "I'd like to discuss payment options. If I were to come up with the money, what would be the procedure?" Bradley blinked, clearly not expecting this pivot. "Well, payment in full would need to be processed before the foreclosure date, but given the acceleration—" As he launched into an explanation of procedures, Emma caught Julia's approving nod. They would keep him talking, keep him here while elsewhere the Brotherhood searched for whatever secret had cost her grandfather his life. White Rock Canyon lived up to its name, a rugged ravine cut through pale limestone by centuries of snowmelt and rain. Iron Mike led the way up a barely visible trail, followed by Alex Dock and 3 other Brotherhood members. They had left their motorcycles at the base of the ridge, proceeding on foot to avoid drawing attention. "According to the survey map," Alex said, consulting a copy they'd made from Emma's files, "the property line begins about a quarter-mile ahead." Iron Mike paused, surveying the harsh landscape. Not exactly prime real estate. What did the captain see in this place? Maybe it's not what's on the surface, Doc suggested, his voice gruff from the climb. Mining potential water rights. They continued in silence, each man alert for signs of surveillance or danger. The canyon narrowed as they proceeded, the walls rising steeply on either side, until they were walking single file through a passage barely 10 feet wide. "Hold up!" Iron Mike called, suddenly raising his hand. "Look there!" He pointed to a nearly invisible line of disturbed soil crossing their path. Kneeling, he brushed away loose rocks to reveal a thin wire, partially buried in the dirt. "Tripwire," he said grimly. "Military grade." Alex crouched beside him. "Recent installation. No rust, no weathering." Iron Mike carefully followed the wire to where it disappeared into a crevice in the canyon wall. Inside, he found a small transmitter. "Motion sensor," he confirmed. "Someone's monitoring this approach." Doc scanned the canyon walls. "We're in a perfect ambush zone. Limited visibility. No cover, restricted movement." "The captain wouldn't lead us into a trap without reason," Iron Mike said, straightening. "Whatever's up there, he thought it was worth protecting." With increased caution, they continued forward now, watching for additional security measures. They found 2 more tripwires and what appeared to be a primitive but effective alarm system using fishing line and tin cans. "These aren't professional security measures," Alex observed. "They're more like warnings." "The captain's work," Iron Mike agreed. His style simple, effective, using available materials. The canyon widened suddenly into a small basin, perhaps 100 yards across, enclosed by steep walls on all sides. At its center stood a dilapidated cabin, its weathered boards gray with age and exposure. "That's not on any of the survey maps," Alex said, consulting his papers again. Iron Mike studied the cabin from their position at the basin's edge. "Looks abandoned, but appearances can be deceiving." "Movement at 3 o'clock. Doc murmured, his hand sliding toward the concealed sidearm beneath his jacket. All eyes turned to see a figure emerge from behind a boulder at the far side of the basin. An old man with a white beard and faded flannel shirt, a hunting rifle, held casually but competently in his weathered hands. "That's far enough," the man called, his voice carrying clearly across the open space. "Private property." Iron Mike raised his hands slowly, signaling the others to do the same. "We're friends of James Davis," he called back. "Eagle Ridge." The old man hesitated, then lowered his rifle slightly. "Davis sent you, in a manner of speaking," Iron Mike replied. "James Davis passed away 3 weeks ago. Heart attack." The news seemed to hit the old man physically. His shoulders sagged, and the rifle barrel dipped toward the ground. "Damn," he muttered, loud enough for them to hear. "Figured it was something like that when he missed our supply drop." He straightened, decision made. "Well, come on then. If you made it past the tripwires without setting them off, you must be who you say you are." They approached cautiously, still alert for traps or deception. As they drew closer, Iron Mike studied the old man, late 70s at least, with the lean toughness of someone who'd spent a lifetime outdoors. "Name's Wilson," the man introduced himself gruffly. "Henry Wilson. James and I served together in Korea." Iron Mike extended his hand. "Mike Donnelly, Shadow Riders." Recognition flashed in Wilson's faded blue eyes. "The captain mentioned you. Said you might come someday." His gaze shifted to the others. "These your men?" "Brotherhood of the Road," Iron Mike confirmed. "We're helping Emma Davis, James's granddaughter, save Eagle Ridge Farm from foreclosure." Wilson's weathered face darkened. "Those bank vultures finally made their move, did they?" "James warned me they would once they figured out what he'd found." Alex stepped forward. "That's what we're trying to understand. Why was this land worth killing for?" Wilson gave him a sharp look. "Killing you? Saying James was murdered? We have reason to believe so," Iron Mike said gravely. "Him and Richard Coleman both." Wilson spat on the ground. "Wouldn't surprise me. There's billions at stake." He gestured toward the cabin. "Come inside. There's something you need to see." Inside the cabin, Iron Mike was struck by how much it resembled a military outpost rather than a civilian dwelling. The space was efficiently organized with provisions stored in standard-issue containers, communications equipment set up at a small desk, and weapons positioned for quick access. Despite its rustic appearance, the cabin had clearly been designed by someone with tactical training. "Solar-powered," Wilson explained, noting their interest in the radio setup. "James installed it last year. Lets me keep in touch without coming down from the mountain." "And you live here permanently?" Doc asked, looking around with professional interest at the living conditions. 4 years now," Wilson confirmed. "Ever since James asked me to keep watch." Wilson moved to a wooden chest disguised to look like ordinary furniture. He released a hidden catch revealing a false bottom. From this concealed compartment, he retrieved a locked metal case. Around his neck he wore a key on a leather cord, which he used to open the case. "This is what they're after," he said, removing a stack of documents. "What James was killed for." The documents proved to be geological surveys, water rights filings, and mineral assay reports. Alex studied them with growing amazement. "This shows extensive rare earth mineral deposits throughout the canyon," he said. "Lithium, neodymium, dysprosium elements, critical for advanced electronics and batteries." "Worth billions in the right hands," Wilson confirmed. "James discovered it accidentally when he was hunting up here 5 years ago. Found some unusual rocks, had them tested privately." Iron Mike leafed through the reports. "The captain bought this land to protect the mineral rights." Wilson nodded. "And to keep it from the developers. They've been buying up everything around here, but they don't know exactly where the deposits are located. The official geological surveys don't show them." "Because your friend James commissioned private surveys and kept them secret," Doc realized. "Precisely," Wilson agreed. "He knew what would happen if Ridgeline Ventures got hold of this land. Strip mining, environmental destruction, the end of Eagle Ridge, as his family had known it for generations." Alex picked up a map with handwritten notations. "These mineral veins, they extend beyond the canyon." "Into Eagle Ridge Farm itself," Wilson confirmed. "The richest deposits are directly under the farmhouse and barn. That's why they're so determined to get the property." Iron Mike's weathered face was grim. "And why Bradley Coleman accelerated the foreclosure when we showed up. He's afraid we'll discover the truth before he can seize the land." "How much time do we have?" Wilson asked. "The sheriff could be serving eviction papers at Eagle Ridge as we speak," Doc replied. Wilson moved to his radio equipment. "Then we'd better warn the girl." James set up a direct channel to the farmhouse for emergencies. But as he activated the radio, only static answered his call. "Something's blocking the signal," he muttered, adjusting dials. Iron Mike's instincts flared. "Or someone is. We need to get back to the farm now." As they hurriedly gathered the documents, a distant sound reached them, the distinctive thump of helicopter rotors echoing off the canyon walls. "Company coming," Doc observed, moving to the cabin window. Through the cracked glass, they could see a black helicopter circling above the canyon rim, too perfectly timed to be coincidence. "They must have been watching the bank," Alex realized. "Followed our movements when Emma and Julia showed up." Iron Mike made a quick decision. "Wilson, can you secure these documents somewhere safe?" The old man nodded. "Got a hiding place they'll never find." "Good. Doc, you and the others stay here, protect Wilson and the evidence." Alex and I will head back to Eagle Ridge. They'll be watching the trail, Doc cautioned. Iron Mike's smile was grim. Then we'll make our own path. The captain taught us how to move unseen, remember. As Wilson hurriedly concealed the documents in a hidden compartment beneath the floorboards, Iron Mike and Alex prepared to depart. The helicopter circled lower, its searchlight sweeping the canyon floor. If we don't make it back, Iron Mike told Doc, get word to the Brotherhood, all chapters full response. Doc nodded solemnly. Ride hard, brother. Iron Mike clasped his shoulder briefly, then turned to Alex. Ready to earn that Shadow Rider patch your father wore? The younger man checked his sidearm determination evident in his stance. For the captain. For Emma. Together they slipped out the cabin's back door and disappeared into the rugged terrain, two shadows moving against the pale rock, carrying with them the truth that could save Eagle Ridge Farm if they reached it in time. In the helicopter above, Sheriff Harris pressed a radio handset to his ear. Movement confirmed at the Wilson cabin. 5, maybe 6 individuals. The voice that answered was cold with authority. Take care of it. No witnesses. Harris hesitated only briefly before responding. Understood, Mr. Coleman. He turned to the tactical team seated behind him, their black uniforms bearing no department insignia, their weapons not standard police issue. Weapons free, he ordered. Clean sweep authorized. As the helicopter descended toward the canyon floor, the endgame had begun. The race to Eagle Ridge Farm and the billions hidden beneath its soil had entered its final deadly phase. In the quiet moments before dawn, Eagle Ridge Farm stood silent beneath a blanket of frost. The mountains beyond cast long shadows across the fields, holding back the coming light, like sentinels of the night. Inside the farmhouse, Emma sat at her grandfather's desk, the voice recorder in her hand, his final words still echoing in her mind. The bank meeting with Bradley Coleman had accomplished little beyond confirming her suspicions. His refusal to produce the original loan documents, his thinly veiled threats, all pointed to the conspiracy her grandfather had uncovered. But the real surprise had come when she and Julia returned to the farm to find the Brotherhood in a state of high alert. Half the riders had taken defensive positions around the property. The other half prepared motorcycles and trucks for rapid movement. Doc Williams had established a command post in the barn radio equipment, humming with coded transmissions. Iron Mike and Alex haven't reported in. Doc had explained, his weathered face grim. They went to investigate your grandfather's property in White Rock Canyon. Should have been back hours ago. Now, as the first hint of dawn touched the eastern sky, Emma stared at the leather journal in her hands. She had finally gathered the courage to read it, to truly understand the man her grandfather had been. The entries painted a picture of a warrior who had come home carrying burdens too heavy to share, a man who found peace in the simple rhythm of farm life, but never forgot the brotherhood forged in battle. The final pages detailed his discovery of rare earth minerals on his land, his realization of what it meant, and his determination to protect Eagle Ridge from those who would strip it bare for profit. There was something else, too, a mission from the Korean War that had haunted him, one that had taken place at a location called Eagle's Point, where he and 5 others had held off an entire battalion to protect a village of civilians. If you're reading this, Emma, the final entry read, then I've failed to finish what I started. The evidence is hidden where only you would think to look. Remember where we watched the eagles that summer when you were 10. The truth waits there. Trust the Brotherhood. They remember their own. A soft knock at the study door pulled Emma from her thoughts. Julia Turner stood in the doorway, her leather riding jacket exchanged for more professional attire. "The sheriff's cruiser just turned onto the access road," she reported. "5 minutes out at most." Emma closed the journal and stood. And still no word from Mike and Alex. Julia shook her head. "Doc's trying another channel now, but we need to prepare for the worst. And the worst? An eviction order, armed deputies, and no evidence to counter the fraudulent foreclosure." Emma's hand closed around the pendant her grandfather had left her, the winged shadow emblem of his wartime unit. "I know where the evidence is," she said suddenly. "Grandpa left a message in his journal." Julia's eyes widened. "Where?" "Eagle's Nest," Emma replied. "A rock formation on the northeast ridge. We used to watch golden eagles nesting there when I was a child. He said the truth is waiting there." "How far?" 20 minutes on horseback, Emma calculated. "But with the sheriff coming—" Julia's expression hardened with resolve. "I'll handle the sheriff. Legal delays, procedural challenges. I can buy you an hour, maybe 2. Take 2 of the Brotherhood as escort and find whatever your grandfather hid." Emma hesitated. "And if it's not there, if I'm wrong, then we fight anyway," Julia replied simply. But James Davis was too smart to leave his granddaughter defenseless. "The evidence exists. We just need to find it." The rumble of engines from the driveway ended further discussion. Through the window, Emma could see 3 police cruisers approaching, lights flashing, but sirens silent. Sheriff Harris sat in the lead vehicle, his expression hard, even at a distance. "Go," Julia urged, "out the back through the orchard. The old trail to the ridge should be clear." Emma grabbed her grandfather's journal and the voice recorder, stuffing them into a small backpack. 2 hours, she promised. "Whatever happens, I'll be back." As Julia moved to confront the arriving lawmen, Emma slipped out the back door and crossed the yard to the stables. 2 Brotherhood members, a woman named Sarah, with combat medic patches on her vest, and an older man called Hawkins, who'd served with her grandfather, were already waiting with saddled horses. "Doc radioed ahead," Sarah explained, helping Emma mount. "Said you'd need escort to the ridge." Emma settled into the saddle of her grandfather's chestnut gelding. "Eagle's Nest," she directed, "and we need to move fast." As they rode away from the farmhouse, Emma glanced back once to see Julia standing on the porch, Sheriff Harris and 4 deputies confronting her with papers in hand. Then they entered the orchard, old apple trees shielding them from view, and Eagle Ridge Farm disappeared behind them. The black helicopter continued its circling pattern above White Rock Canyon, its searchlight sweeping the rugged terrain below. Inside the cabin, Sheriff Harris spoke urgently into his radio. "Movement at the north face. 2 individuals moving east." Iron Mike and Alex had abandoned the main trail, choosing instead to navigate the treacherous canyon wall. Their progress was slow but deliberate. Each handhold carefully tested, each path chosen with tactical precision. "They're heading for the ridgeline," Harris reported. "If they make it to the trees beyond, they won't." Bradley Coleman's voice crackled through the radio. "The evidence can't leave that canyon. Understand?" Harris hesitated, the weight of the order hanging between them. This was no longer about foreclosures or land deals. This was something far darker. "Understood," he finally replied, turning to the tactical team. "Take positions for aerial assault, weapons free." As the helicopter banked sharply, preparing for a strafing run, Iron Mike pulled Alex into a narrow crevice in the canyon wall. Decades of combat experience had taught him to recognize the sound of an attack position. "They're coming in hot," he warned, checking his sidearm, a well-maintained Colt 1911 .45 that had been his constant companion since his Special Forces days. 6 rounds won't do much against that bird." Alex pressed himself against the rock face. We don't need to take it down. Just need to reach the tree line. He pointed to a dense stand of pines less than 200 yards away, their branches offering cover from aerial surveillance. Iron Mike studied the terrain between them and safety. Open ground. They'll cut us down before we're halfway. Unless they're distracted, Alex replied, reaching into his pocket and removing what appeared to be a small remote detonator. Brotherhood insurance policy. Set up the charges while you were talking to Wilson. Iron Mike's weathered face broke into a grim smile. The captain taught you well. The helicopter swooped lower, its searchlight fixing on their position. The rapid staccato of an automatic weapon split the air bullets, impacting the rock inches from where they hid. Now! Alex shouted, pressing the detonator. The explosion came from the far side of the canyon, not large, but enough to send a plume of dust and debris skyward. The helicopter immediately veered toward the disturbance, its attention momentarily diverted. Iron Mike and Alex broke from cover, sprinting across the open ground toward the tree line. Behind them, shouts of alarm erupted from the helicopter as their ruse was discovered. The aircraft banked hard, returning to pursue them, but those precious seconds had given the men the head start they needed. They reached the trees as the first bullets tore through the branches above them. Without slowing, they plunged deeper into the forest, zigzagging between trunks to break the line of sight. We need to warn Emma, Alex gasped as they ran. If they're willing to shoot us down in cold blood, they'll come for Eagle Ridge next, Iron Mike finished grimly. With everything they've got. Julia Turner stood on the porch of Eagle Ridge farmhouse, blocking Sheriff Harris's path, with the calm assurance of a lawyer who knew exactly how far the law could be stretched. The foreclosure order requires proper notice, she was saying, examining the paperwork with deliberate slowness. Federal regulations mandate a minimum 5-day notification period before execution. Harris's patience was visibly thinning. This is an emergency execution order signed by Judge Whitman this morning. The presence of a known criminal organization on the property constitutes exigent circumstances. Behind him, deputies were already fanning out across the yard, taking positions that seemed more appropriate for a raid than a standard eviction. Brotherhood members watched from the barn, tension evident in their posture. The Brotherhood of the Road is a registered non-profit veterans organization, Julia countered smoothly. Their presence as invited guests does not constitute criminal activity. Harris stepped closer, lowering his voice. Miss Turner, I know your reputation. You're smart enough to recognize a losing battle. Tell your clients to stand down and everyone walks away. Julia met his gaze unflinchingly. Is that a threat, Sheriff? A reality check, Harris replied. This isn't just about a farm anymore. No, Julia agreed. It's about murder, fraud, and corruption reaching to the highest levels of Liberty Falls. James Davis documented everything, Sheriff. Every altered loan document, every fraudulent foreclosure, every kickback to ensure the system looked the other way. Something flickered in Harris's eyes, uncertainty, perhaps even fear. You're bluffing. Am I? Julia held his gaze. Why did Richard Coleman really die? Sheriff, did he develop a conscience, threaten to expose the operation, or did he simply become a liability? Before Harris could respond, the radio at his belt crackled to life. Sheriff, we've got a situation at White Rock Canyon. Need immediate backup. Harris stepped away to respond, his voice too low for Julia to hear. When he returned, his expression had hardened into something dangerous. You have 30 minutes to vacate the premises, he announced loud enough for everyone to hear. Anyone remaining will be arrested for criminal trespass. This property is now under county jurisdiction. As Harris returned to his cruiser, Julia pulled out her phone, quickly texting Doc in the barn. Stall tactics exhausted. 30-min deadline, Emma. The response came seconds later. No contact yet. Brotherhood mobilizing. Julia watched as the sheriff's cruisers repositioned to block the main driveway. This wasn't just an eviction, it was a siege. And the clock was ticking. Eagle's Nest loomed above them, a jagged outcropping of rock thrust upward from the ridge like a massive bird of prey. Emma dismounted, scanning the formation with growing urgency. The sun had fully cleared the horizon now, casting long shadows across the mountainside. "This is it," she told Sarah and Hawkins. "My grandfather said the evidence would be here." Hawkins, a lean man with a silver-streaked beard, studied the rocks with a veteran's eye. Defensible position, good sight lines in all directions. The captain chose well. Emma approached the base of the formation where a narrow path wound upward. She'd climbed here countless times as a child, her grandfather always a few steps behind, ready to catch her if she fell. Now she moved with purpose, scanning every crevice, every ledge. "What exactly are we looking for?" Sarah called from below. "I don't know," Emma admitted. "A container, a lockbox, something weatherproof." She reached the summit, a flat expanse of rock no larger than her grandfather's kitchen table. From here the view was breathtaking. Eagle Ridge Farm spread out below the buildings, tiny in the distance, and beyond them the town of Liberty Falls nestled in the valley. Emma turned slowly, trying to think as her grandfather would have. What would he consider a hiding place? Only she would recognize. Her gaze fell on a small cairn of stones near the edge of the outcropping. It seemed natural enough, perhaps formed by weathering or previous visitors. But something about its placement triggered a memory, her grandfather teaching her to build stone markers on their hikes, showing her how to balance each rock perfectly. "This isn't natural," she murmured, kneeling beside the cairn. Carefully, she began removing stones one by one, setting them aside. Beneath the final stone lay a metal cylinder, the kind used by hikers to store maps and emergency supplies. It was painted to match the surrounding rock, nearly invisible, unless you knew exactly where to look. Emma's hands trembled as she unscrewed the cap. Inside, protected by a waterproof seal, she found a USB drive, a small leather pouch, and a handwritten note in her grandfather's familiar script. "Emma, if you're reading this, you remembered our Eagles. The USB contains everything: original loan documents, proof of forgery bank records showing the pattern of fraud, and evidence connecting Bradley Coleman to Richard's death. The memory card has security footage from the bank the night I confronted Richard. It shows Bradley entering after hours. Richard never left the building alive. The pouch contains soil samples from Eagle Ridge and White Rock Canyon. Independent lab results confirming rare earth mineral deposits worth billions. This is what they killed for. Take this to State Attorney General Phillips in Helena. He's expecting it. I contacted his office the day before I died. I'm sorry I kept so much from you. I thought I was protecting you. I was wrong. All my love." Grandpa Emma clutched the cylinder to her chest, relief flooding through her. The evidence existed. Her grandfather had outsmarted them all, reaching from beyond the grave to protect her and the land he loved. The radio at Sarah's belt crackled suddenly. "Eagle Team, this is base. Emergency evac required. Sheriff has issued 30-minute vacate order. Situation deteriorating." Sarah responded immediately. "Copy that. We have the package. Returning to base." "Negative," came Doc's tense reply. "Farm access compromised. Multiple units moving in. Divert to extraction point Bravo." Emma looked to Hawkins for explanation. "Secondary rendezvous," he clarified. 10 miles north, old logging camp. Brotherhood protocol, for when primary location is compromised. But the farm, Emma protested. Julia, Doc, all the others. The Brotherhood takes care of its own, Sarah assured her. But right now, protecting that evidence is the priority. It's what your grandfather died for. As they mounted their horses to descend, a new sound reached them, the distinctive thump of helicopter rotors growing louder by the second. "Move!" Hawkins urged, leading them toward the forest trail. "They must have tracked us." They plunged into the tree line just as a black helicopter crested the ridge behind them. Its searchlight swept the area they had vacated seconds before, then began methodically scanning the forest below. "They're hunting us," Sarah observed grimly. "This isn't about foreclosure anymore." Emma gripped her horse's reins tighter, the metal cylinder secure in her backpack. "No," she agreed. "It's about murder, and they're desperate to cover their tracks." Iron Mike and Alex emerged from the forest onto a county road, their clothes torn, faces scratched from branches, but determination undiminished. Behind them, the sound of the helicopter had faded their pursuers, apparently abandoning the search in that area. "They'll have roadblocks on the main highways," Iron Mike predicted, scanning the empty road. "We need transportation." As if in answer, the rumble of approaching motorcycles reached them. Both men tensed hands, moving toward concealed weapons, then relaxed as they recognized the distinctive sound of Brotherhood Harleys. 3 riders appeared around the bend, led by a massive figure Iron Mike immediately identified as Thomas "Thunder" Rogers, former Army Ranger Silver Star recipient and current national president of the Brotherhood of the Road. His imposing frame was mounted on a meticulously maintained 1993 Harley-Davidson FLSTF Fat Boy, the motorcycle's massive V-twin engine rumbling with raw power. The riders stopped Thunder, dismounting with surprising grace for a man of his size. His silver beard reached almost to his chest, his eyes sharp beneath a weathered brow. "Heard you boys could use a lift." He rumbled, his voice like distant artillery. Iron Mike clasped his arm in the Brotherhood's traditional greeting. "Perfect timing. How did you find us?" "Doc activated the emergency protocol," Thunder explained. "Brotherhood chapters from 5 states are converging on Liberty Falls. Most are still hours out, but my team was already in Helena for a veterans event." Alex stepped forward. "The situation's worse than we thought. They tried to kill us in the canyon. Military-grade weapons tactical team in the helicopter." Thunder's expression darkened. "So it's gone beyond fraud and corruption." "They murdered James Davis," Iron Mike confirmed. "And they'll kill anyone else who threatens to expose them." "Including his granddaughter," Alex added urgently. "She's at the farm with limited protection." Thunder turned to his companions. "Mason, ride back to the advance team. Tell them to expedite to Eagle Ridge Farm. Full tactical response authorized." As the rider departed, Thunder faced Iron Mike again. "What did you find in the canyon?" Quickly, Iron Mike explained about Wilson the cabin and the mineral deposits beneath Eagle Ridge Farm. "Billions of dollars," he concluded. "More than enough motive for murder." Thunder nodded grimly. "And more than enough reason for powerful men to bend the law to breaking point." He gestured to the remaining motorcycles. "Mount up. We need to reach the farm before they do something desperate." At Eagle Ridge Farm, the 30-minute deadline had expired. Sheriff Harris stood at the edge of the driveway, bullhorn in hand, addressing the Brotherhood members who had formed a line in front of the barn. "This is your final warning." His amplified voice echoed across the yard. "Vacate the premises immediately or face arrest for criminal trespass." Doc Williams stepped forward, his stance relaxed but alert. "This is private property, Sheriff. We're here at the owner's invitation." "The owner is in default," Harris countered. County has assumed temporary custody pending resolution of foreclosure proceedings. From the porch, Julia observed the standoff with growing concern. Emma still hadn't returned, and the Brotherhood's delaying tactics were running thin. Behind the sheriff's line, she could see additional vehicles arriving, not standard police cruisers, but unmarked SUVs with tinted windows. Her phone vibrated with an incoming text. Unknown number, but the message was clear. Evidence secured. E safe. Extraction point B. Hold position if possible. Relief flooded through her. Emma had found what they needed. Now they just had to prevent a bloodbath until reinforcements arrived. Julia stepped off the porch, approaching the sheriff with deliberate confidence. "Sheriff Harris, I'd like to propose a compromise." Harris lowered the bullhorn, eyeing her suspiciously. "I'm listening." "My clients will vacate the barn and outbuildings," Julia offered. "They'll restrict their presence to the main house until a proper hearing can be scheduled with the State Banking Commission. Say 48 hours from now." "That's not how this works," Harris replied, but she noted his tone lacked conviction. "The order is for complete vacancy." "An order based on procedural irregularities that won't survive judicial review," Julia countered smoothly. "You know that as well as I do. This compromise saves everyone unnecessary conflict and potential liability." Harris hesitated, and in that moment of indecision, Julia saw something she hadn't expected: fear. Not of the Brotherhood, but of something else. Perhaps the consequences of what he'd set in motion. 2 hours, he finally conceded. They can remain in the house for 2 hours while personal belongings are collected. Not a minute more. It wasn't much, but it was something. Time for Emma to reach safety with the evidence. Time for Brotherhood reinforcements to arrive. Time for the truth to emerge. "Agreed," Julia said, extending her hand to formalize the deal. As Harris reached to shake, the rumble of an approaching vehicle interrupted the moment. A black Mercedes AMG G63 sped up the driveway, braking hard behind the police cruisers. Bradley Coleman emerged, his usual polish replaced by barely contained fury. "What the hell is this?" he demanded, striding toward Harris. "I thought I was clear about the timeline." Harris turned, clearly uncomfortable. "We're working out a peaceful resolution, Mr. Coleman. 2-hour extension before—" "No extensions," Coleman snapped. "Execute the order now. That's why I brought backup." He gestured toward the unmarked SUVs from which men in tactical gear were now emerging. Unlike the sheriff's deputies, these men carried military-grade weapons and moved with the precision of private security contractors. Julia stepped between Coleman and Harris. "This is still a legal proceeding, Mr. Coleman. You have no authority to dictate terms to law enforcement." Coleman's smile was cold. "You'd be surprised what authority I have, Miss Turner." He turned to Harris. "Sheriff, if you're not prepared to enforce the order, my security team will secure the property." Harris visibly paled. "That would be highly irregular." "So file a complaint." Coleman cut him off. "By the time it's processed, this will all be over." The situation was deteriorating rapidly. Julia could see the Brotherhood members tensing, preparing for conflict. Doc had moved his people into defensive positions, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. Then, in the tense silence that followed Coleman's declaration, a new sound emerged from the distance. Not the rumble of a few motorcycles, but the thunder of many dozens, perhaps hundreds, growing louder by the second. Every head turned toward the main road where a cloud of dust was rising. Through it, the lead riders of an approaching column became visible, a massive formation of motorcycles 3 abreast, stretching back as far as the eye could see. The Brotherhood had arrived in force. The old logging camp that served as Extraction Point Bravo was little more than a clearing, with the remains of a few dilapidated buildings. Emma, Sarah, and Hawkins arrived to find several Brotherhood members already there, establishing a perimeter and setting up communications equipment. "Status report," Hawkins demanded as they dismounted. A young rider with communications gear stepped forward. "Farm situation critical. Sheriff deployed with substantial force. Brotherhood mobilization underway, but ETA still uncertain." "And the evidence?" Sarah asked, nodding toward Emma's backpack. "Needs to reach the Attorney General in Helena," Emma replied. "Today." The communications specialist checked his equipment. "Thunder's team is en route to the farm. They've dispatched riders to escort you to Helena. Should be here within 20 minutes. Emma paced anxiously, the weight of responsibility heavy on her shoulders. "The helicopter that followed us, it could track us here." "Unlikely," Hawkins assured her. "We maintained tree cover, used the ridgeline to break line of sight. Standard evasion tactics." Still, Emma couldn't shake the feeling of being hunted. She removed the cylinder from her backpack, checking its contents again. The USB drive, the soil samples, her grandfather's note. Everything that could bring down Bradley Coleman and his corrupt enterprise. "There's something I don't understand," she said, turning to Hawkins. "If the mineral deposits are so valuable, why not just offer to buy the land legitimately? Why the elaborate fraud scheme?" Hawkins stroked his beard thoughtfully. "Two reasons, I'd guess. First, legitimate purchase would involve geological surveys, environmental impact studies, all public record. They wanted to keep the deposits secret until they had secured all the necessary land. And second, greed," he said simply. "Why pay market value when you can steal it for pennies on the dollar? Men like Coleman don't build empires by playing fair." A sudden commotion at the perimeter interrupted their conversation. Two riders had arrived, not the expected escort from Thunder's team, but Iron Mike and Alex, looking battered but alive. Emma rushed forward as they dismounted. "Thank God," she breathed. "We thought you were—" "Nearly were," Iron Mike confirmed grimly. "They're not playing by any rules now." Alex embraced Emma briefly. "Did you find what your grandfather hid?" She patted her backpack. "Everything we need to bring them down, but we have to get it to Helena." Iron Mike surveyed the camp with a veteran's eye. "This position is too exposed. We need to move you out immediately." "Thunder dispatched an escort," Hawkins informed him. "Should be here any—" The sharp crack of a rifle shot cut him off. One of the perimeter guards crumpled a spray of red, misting the air. "Contact!" someone shouted. "North Ridge," Iron Mike reacted instantly, pulling Emma behind the cover of a fallen log. "Sniper team," he assessed, scanning the ridgeline. "Professional, military-grade equipment." More shots followed, precise and methodical. Two more Brotherhood members fell before the others could reach cover. "They tracked us after all," Sarah realized, crouching beside them, medical kit already in hand. Alex had pulled out a compact pair of binoculars. "4 shooters on the ridge, 2 moving to flank us from the east. This isn't law enforcement. These are mercenaries." Emma clutched the evidence cylinder tightly. "They can't get this. No matter what happens to me, this has to reach the Attorney General." Iron Mike's weathered face was grim with resolve. "Nothing's happening to you, Emma. The captain entrusted you to our care, and the Brotherhood protects its own." The situation was dire. They were pinned down, outnumbered, outgunned, and facing trained killers. The promised escort from Thunder was still minutes away, minutes they might not have. Then, from Emma's backpack, her grandfather's voice recorder accidentally activated his final message, playing through the chaos. "If something happens to me, find Mike Donnelly, the Brotherhood of the Road. Show them the shadow with wings and they'll help you finish what I started." In that moment, something shifted in Iron Mike's expression, a hardening of resolve, a clarity of purpose. He turned to Alex. communication passing between them without words. "South Creek bed," he said simply. "Extraction route Charlie. Get her to Helena. We'll cover." Alex nodded once, understanding the sacrifice being offered. "It's been an honor, brother." Emma began to protest, but Iron Mike's hand closed firmly on her shoulder. "Your grandfather gave his life to protect this land and expose the truth. Honor his sacrifice by finishing what he started." Tears stung Emma's eyes, but she nodded. "I will. I promise." As more gunfire peppered their position, Alex guided Emma toward a narrow ravine that led away from the camp. Behind them, Iron Mike, Sarah Hawkins, and the remaining Brotherhood members prepared to mount a distraction, a last stand to ensure her escape. "On my mark!" Iron Mike called, checking his weapon. 3, 2, 1. The coordinated response he'd planned was interrupted by a new sound. The unmistakable roar of dozens of motorcycle engines, followed by return fire from the ridge line. Through the trees, Emma could see Brotherhood riders converging on the camp from multiple directions. Weapons drawn, moving with military precision. The escort had arrived, and they'd brought reinforcements. "Change of plans," Iron Mike announced, a fierce grin breaking through his weathered features. "Looks like we all make it to Helena after all." At Eagle Ridge Farm, the balance of power had shifted dramatically. Where Bradley Coleman's security team had once held the advantage, they now faced over 200 Brotherhood members, many of them combat veterans, forming an impenetrable line across the property. Thunder Rogers stood at the center of that line, his massive frame radiating authority. Beside him, Doc Williams and Julia Turner watched as Coleman and Sheriff Harris engaged in a heated discussion by the police cruisers. "They're fracturing," Julia observed. "Harris knows he's on the wrong side of this now." Thunder nodded. "Fear has a way of clarifying priorities. The sheriff is calculating his chances of avoiding prison time." Indeed, Sheriff Harris's body language had changed markedly. His earlier confidence had evaporated, replaced by defensive posture and nervous gestures. Whatever Coleman was demanding, Harris was clearly reluctant to comply. Finally, Harris turned and approached the Brotherhood line alone, and with his hands visible. "I need to speak with whoever's in charge," he called, his voice lacking its earlier authority. Thunder stepped forward. "Thomas Rogers, Brotherhood of the Road. State your business, Sheriff." Harris's eyes widened slightly at the name Thunder's reputation preceded him. "I'm proposing a stand down. All parties withdraw pending judicial review of the foreclosure order." "That's a start," Thunder acknowledged, "but insufficient, given the circumstances." Harris swallowed visibly. What circumstances would those be? "The attempted murder of Brotherhood members at White Rock Canyon," Thunder replied coldly. "The deployment of private military contractors on American soil. The conspiracy to defraud landowners across 3 counties. The murders of James Davis and Richard Coleman." Each accusation landed like a physical blow. Harris seemed to shrink before their eyes. "Those are serious allegations," he managed finally. "Without evidence." "We have the evidence," Julia interjected. "All of it. Original loan documents proving forgery. Soil samples confirming valuable mineral deposits. Security footage showing Bradley Coleman entering the bank the night Richard Coleman died." Harris's face paled. "Where?" "Safe," Thunder replied. "En route to the state attorney general as we speak." Behind Harris, Bradley Coleman had apparently heard enough. He barked orders at his security team, who began moving toward their vehicles with purpose. "They're pulling out," Doc observed. "Cutting their losses." Harris turned to watch Coleman's retreat, the abandonment clearly unexpected. When he faced Thunder again, his expression had changed the look of a man who'd realized he was being left to take the fall. "I want immunity," he said quietly, in exchange for testimony. Thunder's eyes narrowed. That's not our decision to make. But cooperation now might work in your favor. Harris considered this, then nodded once. Coleman orchestrated everything. The loan fraud, the foreclosures, the mineral rights acquisition. When Richard threatened to expose him, Bradley arranged his death heart attack, induced by an untraceable compound developed for covert operations. And James Davis, Thunder pressed. Same method, Harris confirmed. Bradley panicked when he learned Davis had evidence, ordered the hit personally. Julia had been recording the confession on her phone. Now she stopped satisfied. You'll need to repeat all of this for state authorities. Harris nodded grimly. I know. It's over. As the sheriff returned to his cruisers, ordering his deputies to stand down, Thunder turned to Doc and Julia. Status update on Emma. Doc checked his radio. Attack at Extraction Point Bravo. Brotherhood response team engaged. Situation fluid. Thunder's expression darkened. Alert all units. Primary objective remains securing the Davis girl and the evidence. Nothing else matters. The ride to Helena passed in a blur for Emma. After the Brotherhood reinforcements had overwhelmed the mercenaries at the logging camp, Thunder's elite escort team had formed around her, creating a protective convoy that moved with practiced efficiency. Iron Mike rode directly beside her, his weathered face set in determined lines. Alex flanked her other side while 20 additional riders surrounded them in a moving defensive formation. The evidence cylinder was secure in a specialized courier pouch strapped across Emma's chest. They avoided main roads, taking back routes and Forest Service tracks that only locals would know. 3 hours of hard riding brought them to the outskirts of Helena, where they were met by another Brotherhood contingent, this one led by a distinguished-looking man in his 60s wearing a well-tailored suit beneath his leather vest. Judge Richardson, Iron Mike greeted him with respect. Didn't expect to see you in colors today. The judge, apparently also a Brotherhood member, nodded grimly. Some occasions demand it. Ms. Davis, I'm Franklin Richardson, Montana 8th District Court. I've arranged an emergency meeting with Attorney General Phillips. Emma dismounted, legs stiff from the long ride. You're with the Brotherhood, too. 20 years, Richardson confirmed. Your grandfather saved my life at Heartbreak Ridge. Back then he was just a medic with a rifle, but he held off enemy forces for 3 hours while treating the wounded. Finest man I ever served with. He gestured to a waiting SUV with state government plates. We should move quickly. Word of today's events has reached certain circles in Helena. Pressure is already being applied to bury this. The drive through Helena's government district was tense, but uneventful. Judge Richardson made several calls ensuring their path remained clear. They arrived at the Justice Department building through a secured underground entrance, bypassing the usual security protocols. Attorney General Phillips was waiting in a conference room flanked by 2 senior investigators. In his late 50s, with sharp eyes and the no-nonsense demeanor of a career prosecutor, he wasted no time on pleasantries. Ms. Davis, he acknowledged. Judge Richardson briefed me on the basics. I understand you have evidence of a multi-county fraud scheme involving bank officials, law enforcement, and potentially elected officials. Emma removed the cylinder from its pouch and placed it on the conference table. My grandfather documented everything before he was murdered. Original loan documents proving forgery soil samples showing why they wanted our land and evidence connecting Bradley Coleman to at least 2 homicides. Phillips examined the contents methodically, particularly the USB drive and memory card. After reviewing several files on his laptop, he looked up, his expression grave. This is the most comprehensive case of corruption I've seen in 30 years of prosecution, he said finally. Your grandfather was extremely thorough. Will it be enough? Emma asked. These people have money influence. They also have enemies, Phillips interrupted. Other powerful interests who don't appreciate this kind of operation in their backyard. The governor has already authorized an emergency task force. State police units are being deployed to Liberty Falls as we speak. Judge Richardson nodded approvingly. And Bradley Coleman, being detained at a roadblock outside Bozeman, Phillips replied, along with his security team. They made the mistake of crossing county lines with unregistered military-grade weapons. That alone will hold them while we build the larger case. Emma felt a weight lifting from her shoulders, not completely gone, but lighter than it had been in weeks. And Eagle Ridge Farm, the foreclosure, immediately suspended, pending investigation, Phillips assured her. Given the evidence of fraud, I've already filed for an emergency injunction. Your home is secure, Ms. Davis. The meeting continued for hours, as Emma detailed everything she'd learned about Coleman's operation, the mineral deposits, and her grandfather's investigation. Iron Mike and Alex provided testimony about the attack at White Rock Canyon, while Judge Richardson worked to expedite warrants for searches and arrests. By evening, news reports were breaking across Montana, prominent banker arrested on corruption charges, sheriff in custody state investigation launched into land fraud scheme spanning 3 counties. The story was moving faster than Bradley Coleman's lawyers could contain it. As Emma finally emerged from the Justice Department building, exhausted but relieved, she found Thunder Rogers waiting beside a Brotherhood escort. Mission accomplished, Captain's granddaughter, he said with gruff approval. Your grandfather would be proud. Emma looked up at this mountain of a man, his weathered face bearing the marks of countless battles, his eyes reflecting a code of honor from another era. Thank you, she said simply. All of you. I couldn't have done this alone. Thunder's expression softened slightly. Your family now. The Brotherhood protects its own. What happens next? She asked. Justice, Thunder replied, for your grandfather, for Richard Coleman, for all the families who lost their land. The wheels are in motion now, too big for even Bradley Coleman to stop. Emma nodded, then asked the question that had been nagging at her since the helicopter attack. What about Sheriff Harris? Will he face justice too? He's cooperating, Thunder explained. Trading testimony for consideration. Not ideal, but sometimes that's how justice works. The important thing is that the operation is exposed and Coleman will pay for his crimes. As they prepared to return to Eagle Ridge Farm, Emma felt a strange mixture of emotions, grief for her grandfather, relief that his killers would face justice, anxiety about the future, and something else she hadn't expected, belonging. The Brotherhood had embraced her not just as James Davis's granddaughter, but as one of their own. The ride back to Eagle Ridge was quieter, the urgency replaced by solemn purpose. As they crested the final ridge, Emma saw her farm spread out below the buildings, illuminated by the setting sun. Brotherhood motorcycles still lined the driveway, their owners maintaining watch over the property that had nearly been stolen. At the farmhouse, Doc Julia and the others waited. With news state police had secured the bank's records, Coleman's security team had been arrested, and the corrupt judge who had signed the foreclosure order had resigned, facing charges of his own. It's over, Julia assured her. Your grandfather's legacy is safe. But Emma knew it wasn't quite finished. There was one more thing James Davis would have wanted. The morning dawned, clear and cold frost painting the fields of Eagle Ridge Farm in crystalline white. Emma stood on the porch, watching as Brotherhood members gathered in the yard. Not just the original 20 who had arrived in the snowstorm, but hundreds more who had answered the call when one of their own needed help. They formed a circle around the small family plot behind the house, where James Davis lay beside his wife and son. Iron Mike stood at Emma's side as she addressed the gathering. "My grandfather kept many secrets," she began, her voice carrying in the still morning air. "He never spoke of his time as a shadow rider, never mentioned the lives he saved or the brotherhood he left behind. I thought I knew him, but I only knew part of the man." She looked around at the weathered faces of men who had shared her grandfather's wartime experiences, who understood parts of him she never would. "But he left behind more than secrets," she continued. "He left a legacy of honor, courage, and sacrifice. He died protecting this land, not just for me, but for all of you, his other family." At her signal, Doc and Alex unveiled a simple granite marker they had placed beside her grandfather's headstone. Engraved upon it was the Shadow Rider's emblem, the winged shadow, and beneath it the words, "Captain James Davis, Shadow Rider, Brotherhood of the Road. He never left a man behind." Thunder stepped forward, his massive frame somehow gentler in this solemn moment. "In the tradition of the Brotherhood," he announced, "we commit our brother James to his final rest, knowing his mission is complete and his legacy secured." One by one, each member of the Brotherhood approached the grave, leaving tokens of respect. Military patches, challenge coins, personal mementos. When the last rider had paid tribute, Thunder turned to Emma. "The Brotherhood has voted," he said formally. "Eagle Ridge Farm is now designated a sanctuary, a place of rest and healing for veterans who carry wounds visible and invisible. If you're willing, the captain's legacy will continue through this land." Emma felt tears welling in her eyes. "He would want that," she said, "more than anything." Thunder nodded solemnly, then presented her with a leather jacket smaller than the others, but bearing the same patch as Shadow Riders on one shoulder, Brotherhood of the Road on the other. "The first female member in our history," he explained. "Honorary status granted by unanimous vote. The captain's daughter in all but blood." As Emma slipped on the jacket, the leather still stiff and new, a rumble began. First one motorcycle engine, then another, until hundreds of Harleys roared to life in unified tribute. The distinctive potato-potato-potato rhythm of the V-twin engines created a rolling thunder that echoed across Eagle Ridge Farm, rolled over the mountains beyond, and seemed to touch the very clouds above. It was a warrior's farewell, a brother's salute, a promise kept. In the months that followed, Eagle Ridge transformed. The barn became a gathering place for veterans seeking peace and purpose. The fields yielded crops tended by hands that had once carried weapons. The mineral deposits remained in the ground, protected by new legislation, spearheaded by Attorney General Phillips' legislation that bore James Davis's name. Bradley Coleman and his associates faced justice, their empire of corruption dismantled piece by piece. The families who had lost their farms received compensation, though some wounds could never be fully healed. And Emma Davis, once a solitary figure fighting alone to save her inheritance, found herself surrounded by a new family, one forged in battle, bound by honor, and dedicated to the principles her grandfather had lived by. Each night, as darkness fell over Eagle Ridge Farm, she would stand on the porch her grandfather had built, listening to the voices of Brotherhood members swapping stories in the barn, their laughter carrying on the evening breeze. Sometimes she thought she could feel her grandfather's presence beside her, nodding in approval at what his legacy had become. In those moments, Emma would touch the Shadow Rider emblem on her leather jacket and remember his final written words to her. "All my love, Grandpa." The young nurse and the elderly captain had more in common than blood. They shared a core of steel that bent, but never broke, a commitment to justice that transcended fear, and a capacity for love that extended beyond family to embrace all who carried similar burdens. Eagle Ridge Farm had once been just a place. Land and buildings passed from generation to generation. Now it was something more, a sanctuary, a brotherhood, a legacy of honor that would endure long after those who established it had ridden their final mile. And in the end, perhaps that was the greatest victory of all.